Hey everybody, this is Dr. William Clark here for Leadership Conversations. This is the show where we talk about leadership according to the role that matters to you. We've been spending all of 2019 talking about how to launch a business, and in many cases launch a nonprofit ministry, church, etc., which is what this podcast specializes in. And so we've been committed to bringing in people who've actually done it, who are actually in the middle of it. And so brought in my guest, Pastor Brandon Whitfield. Brother, what's going on?
Nothing much. It's good to be here, man.
Yeah, Brandon is a church planner. I'll let him introduce himself. And so he represents the person that we've been talking about. So thanks for coming in, man.
Yes, I'm glad you had me here. Thank you.
So before we jump into it, man, tell us about yourself. Tell us who you are and what makes you qualified to talk about this topic of planting and launching a business.
Well, long story short, I'm Brandon Whitfield. I was born in Georgia, raised in North Carolina. I moved here to pursue a career in television and broadcasting. That didn't work out, so I chose church planting. I've been in ministry for a long time. I did some evangelical work for about 10 years. I've traveled all over to many, many different churches, and it was fulfilling for me. And when I came to Connecticut, I gained this passion for church planting, and that's where I am now.
Yeah,
the good city of Danbury, Connecticut.
Well, let's go back. So what city were you born in?
I was born in Brunswick, Georgia.
Yeah, don't know what that is.
Exactly. I didn't think you would. No one does.
Where is that?
I don't know.
All right, so for the non-Georgia folks, how far is that from Atlanta, which is where everybody knows?
I don't know. I was born there, and then I got on the midnight train from Georgia.
Oh, so you were there for like 2 seconds?
Just for 2 seconds. Yeah.
Ah, okay. So then when did you actually move up to Connecticut?
I moved to Connecticut in 2011 from North Carolina.
Okay. So we moved here 2014/2015, so a little bit after you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. So then how did you go from television and media to church planting?
Interesting question. I have always felt called to the ministry. I think I kind of tried to run away from it, pursuing the broadcasting career. I always had a heart for broadcasting. Eventually, I believe the two worlds will meet one day. That is the ultimate dream for me. But for now, I've placed broadcasting on hold, and I've started to pursue church planting. I actually moved to New York to get into broadcasting. So, go figure. It was not a success for me. I was, competing with people who had been here for many years, and I was only being offered internships, and, you can't pay Manhattan rent with internships. So I got invited to take up a position in Connecticut in a bank, and I did that. And I decided that I was going to just surrender to ministry as my wife continued to encourage me to do so. And honestly, it was the best thing I've ever done. I'm glad I did.
So what were you looking to do in television and broadcasting?
News.
As a broadcaster?
Yes. That was my passion. It kept me up night and day. I even had a talk show. You didn't know that?
No, that's why I'm excited. I'm just processing all this like, what?
Yes, I had a talk show. It was called The Pew, and I had it in yes, see? The theology meets, mainstream media. It was really good. It was actually a really good show. I'm not just saying it because it was mine. It was a wonderful show because what I did was, me, and it was a whole team of people with us, but we took people who were doing extraordinary things, and we just kind of shined a spotlight on them. The whole goal of the show was to get people who were hiding their gifts in the pews, to get them the light to be shined on them, because oftentimes in ministry it's just the people who are on the pulpit, and there's so many talents in the pews. Yeah. Are you baffled?
Yes.
You didn't see that, huh?
No.
Wow, that's interesting. I thought you knew that.
No.
So you moved here in 2015, you said?
So the family moved in 14. I moved in 15.
Okay, so
either way, I would have never.
Yeah, you wouldn't have known. Yeah, but it was good times.
So,
Yes.
So you feel like the worlds of ministry and media
Broadcasting,
and
yeah.
broadcasting. How do you envision that colliding one day?
Well, I kind of try to look at people who are already doing what I want to do.
So who would that be?
That would be like Paul and Jan, who were the founders of TBN. I would love to have a broadcasting network one day. That was, Christ centered. Not necessarily everything has to, every show or production on it doesn't have to be, a Christian show. Some of it can just be, worldviews, things like that. But, ultimately that's what I would love to do.
So how does a vision for a broadcasting network fit within the confines of a world that's becoming increasingly like this office, like YouTube, um, and less traditional in the sense of what TBN created? How does
Well, you got to move with the times. Obviously, I wouldn't, 10 years from now, building a TBN would probably be impossible because there's no demand for that. I think TBN is kind of moving closer to what you are doing here and internet. I mean, I don't even have cable.
neither do I.
It's like, that's where the world is moving to. I mean, the last few movies I've watched have been on Netflix. You very rarely even go to the movie theaters.
Because you can't. You got a kid.
Yeah, I got a kid, and I'm upset about that fee increase. So, that's where we are. I think that, ultimately as a pastor, I would love to be able to have a space in our church that we could do broadcasting. I don't care where it's streaming from, whoever's watching or listening, but that's who we want to hear and listen.
Now, what type of broadcasting are you talking about? Is it podcasting? Is it the streaming of the service, or is it some other show, or what are you thinking about?
I'm not in this now.
Okay.
So I've really stepped away from it. But I will have to revisit this. But if I were to revisit it, where I believe it would be is I definitely would be on screen. I think I would redo what we were doing at the Pew, just on a smaller scale. We did things in a very large scale at the Pew, and it was overwhelming.
And did you do it at Rehoboth?
No, we did it at Comcast Studios in Danbury.
And then you found people who were somewhere in the pew, invited them to the studio.
They found us. We had to look for guests probably for the first month. The show took off. It really did well. And people started coming to us for, to market their ministry. It started turning to that. And that to me is something that I wasn't really as interested in as I was, kind of shining lights on talent that really wasn't discovered. It turned into the ministries were looking at us as a platform to advertise their own ministry. So it was like kind of like a self-gain thing, which, is hard to kind of stay away from. It always turns into that.
That's interesting. I mean, I can imagine why, because that's nothing like that in Connecticut. Outside of Sundays, I can't find a gospel station in Connecticut.
We don't even have a Christian radio station in Danbury.
Okay, so but let alone in Hartford or
yeah,
Greater Hartford.
Oh, you don't have one in Hartford?
Not that I know of.
Wow.
If we do, it'll be news to me.
Wow, that's interesting.
Because in Philly, you can turn to the gospel station.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, it was AM,
Mm-hmm.
and then it morphed into FM. But here, I haven't heard of a Christian station outside of like the traditional Christian K-Love type deal, but nothing gospel centered.
Yeah, it would be great to have it. It would be great to have it.
But then why not start one online in your living room
Why not?
and stream it on Facebook?
Why not?
Kind of like this podcast.
Okay, plug. That would be great. That would be excellent. You have to start somewhere,
Yeah.
But I really, my heart never turned from it. I just kind of got in a different season in my life, and I felt strongly called towards church planting. And I don't believe that you can do 100 things well. If I'm focused on something, I put all of my effort, all of my money, all of my interest in that one particular thing. I study it night and day, and that's what I throw myself at. And so if I was going to do church planting, it was going to be 100% church planting and not 9 to 5 corporate America, and then later on in the evening, radio and broadcasting, and then on Sundays, church planting. So that's where I am.
Does that mean because you have that philosophy, do you believe that others are not capable of doing that, going to work, following a passion project, and pastoring on a Sunday?
All things are possible. All things are possible. I think balance is key. I know what I struggle with, and that is balance. I do not have it in me to juggle 1,000 hats. I've seen people who do it so well. I envy them. It's not me.
Mm.
I just have to focus on one thing. Otherwise, I'm distracted. I can't even read 2 books at once. I have to read one book at a time. And sometimes I have to revisit the previous chapter so that I know what's going on where I am.
So I'm on the opposite end of that. I'm that guy that I am reading multiple books right now.
No, I envy you.
I mean, it is not a good or a bad thing. I think it's something that I kind of morphed into doing because, just to take the book example, it is a representation of a broader philosophy of stuff. But even just looking at reading a couple of books at a time, for me, there are so many things happening in my life right now. I need wise counsel to speak into those multiple things. Or there's one thing big that's happened in my life, and I need multiple voices speaking into me, primarily through the written text of a book. So, I'm reading multiple books to speak into those situations or scenarios because it helps give me different perspectives to choose from. And then from there, I can kind of figure out how I want to move forward.
That makes sense.
That's interesting.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I can see how that works for you. I mean, you're very intelligent. I, on the other hand, that's not me. It just is not me. I can read one book at a time, and I get everything out of that book that I can. And, it's funny because I can pick up a book in 3 years and get something completely different out of it than I did the first time. But I think ultimately that's for everybody because you're in a different season in your life and you see things differently and you have different perspectives.
So let's get into the season you're in right now, which is church planting. And for the sake of this podcast, I mean, we've been talking about church planting, pastoring, launching a church in the context of a business. If folks don't know, if you're listening, a church is a business. It is different.
You better not say that to us Pentecostals.
It's a curse word.
We don't believe
in holiness.
No, not a business.
But it is a business. Somehow you're gonna have to pay those bills and chicken dinners.
No. When people give their tithes, we upload it straight to heaven. It's God's money, not ours. That's what we believe and we stand on.
It's fake news. I think dealing with that reality of what's going on in the church world, realizing it is a business, is a big deal. And I think people need to know. You get the inspiration to start a project, product, business, service, ministry, etc. It is a business. And I mean, when you think about going through the registration process in our state, any state, you're registered as a business. Just happens to be a faith-based business. So this is the season you're in right now. You decided to launch this. What inspired you to leave broadcasting and TV to get into this full-time, to get into planting full-time?
I think what really inspired me, first of all, I really felt an immensely strong call towards this. I really did. And I don't want to sound so super spiritual, but I really felt a pull towards this. So that's number one that inspired me. Number two, I saw ministry in a different light, and I began to see it as a career. Until I saw it as a career, I don't think I would have been doing this. I was looking for a career.
Hold on. That's a curse word in Pentecostal world too.
I know. I'm half Pentecostal. I'm mixed. I'm mixed. You'll find that out very soon. I believe ministry is a career. I'm sorry. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I really do believe you go to school, you get a degree, you study theology, you apply for jobs in many cases in many organizations, including mine, Church of God. You apply for jobs. The more experience you have, the bigger opportunities you have. It just is the way it is.
Yeah. Not that I disagree with you. It's just a curse word in the Pentecostal
I
world.
understand. We say a lot of cuss words.
Because there are a lot of unqualified people in a pulpit.
Yes, I take issue with that.
Anyway, we'll get back to that later. So you felt called. You felt like this was a career pathway for you.
Yeah, definitely. I felt called. And again, until I saw this as a career, I was career driven. And broadcasting for me, that was my career. speaking with my wife, she really was the key player in getting me to turn and focus on what she felt the Lord was calling me to do and what I felt the Lord was calling me to do, which was church planting. And I would have never done it if I didn't see it as a career, because I always, growing up, I never saw ministry as a career. No one ever told me it was a career or that it could be a career. It was something that you did on Sunday mornings, or for many of us who grew up in the church, throughout every single day of the week. No matter, even if it was a school night, you were in church. I didn't see it as a career. That changed for me, and when I saw that change, then I continued to pursue it. That's really what encouraged me to do it.
So, for people who are wondering, when you start to use the language church planting as a career, are you saying planting churches as a career, or planting a church to be a pastor as a career, a pastor at that place? Or are you saying something else?
No, I'm saying both. It can be both. It just depends on the person. I particularly believe, for instance, the church that I have planted, right? I particularly believe that this church can be multiple churches, multiple different locations. Just like the person that, built McDonald's. They didn't see it being just one place. It turned into a franchise. I know that's another cuss word. We don't have franchises in the body of Christ, and
Yes, we do.
We don't have franchises in the body of Christ. No,
Lies.
Absolutely not.
Church of God, my Reformation,
no franchises.
Baptist.
No,
follow the rules.
Denominations are not franchises.
Lies. He's lying to you. It's fake news. This is a franchise.
Yes, it certainly can be. But so it depends on your career path, because some people, they plan a church and that's all they want to do. They do that for the rest of their life. They're there for 30 years and that's it. Mm-hmm. And then they go. So it can be different things for different people. But for me, the road is unlimitless. I don't know what the end of my road looks like.
Got you. All right, so there's a couple of things I want to dig into. So we've been in this series of podcasts this year, really pushing folks to get beyond the feel good moment of January 1, which is I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna do this. And really gut checking them to say, all right, great, do it. Like, where are you at right now? And so we've been teaching on the podcast just various principles about launching and building a business. So you talked about planting a church. How is that different, or how is that similar to building a business in your mind, a non-faith-based business in your mind?
I've never built a non-faith-based business. It's going to be very difficult for me to make that comparison, but I'll try to, from maybe customer standpoint. I believe it is similar. Obviously, you need to have a vision. You need to have a plan. The Bible talks about how we should write the vision and make it plain. And for me, that was an eye opener because I thought I knew what I wanted for our church until I wrote it down. And like the Bible gave us that instructions to write it and make it plain. It wasn't until I wrote it down, it became plain to me that there were some things that I absolutely could not do. And then you take into the consideration of overhead. What are you going to have as your overhead? I think that's very similar to when you're opening up a business. You need to know that. What is going to be your profits? What's going to be your losses? Those are things that you have to take into consideration as well. And a lot of people don't. And they get out here and they think that, they can do it because they have zeal and they have spirit. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, it takes more than that. You will not be able to go into the bank and get a loan approved with just zeal and spirit.
Yes, you can. Just pray for it.
Okay. Okay. You can do that. I don't know what kind of tongues you use. Just let me know so I can borrow them. But no, it doesn't work. It is not reality, and people are failing every single day, and we're seeing the doors of the churches close for the same reasons that doors close on Main Street for their businesses. It's because they didn't have a plan. They didn't think it out right. They weren't realistic with their numbers, and you got to be realistic.
So let's dig into this. You said that it was an eye-opener when you wrote your vision down.
Oh, God, yeah.
The way you said that made it seem like you read the scripture for years, you understood it, but then when you actually tried to practice the scripture, it was just like, what? So walk us through that experience
The
when you
thing
wrote the
is,
vision.
though, that there was nothing wrong with the scripture. All the fluff that was placed on the scripture my entire life, there
Like
was
what?
everything wrong with that. That name it and claim it. You know,
You're just destroying church myths. This is not the podcast for that.
I know your viewers are probably logging off as we speak. Sorry,
but it's true.
I just
pray it and it shall be. Turn around 3 times.
Yes, and all you're doing is dizzy. You're just making yourself dizzy, and that's what I feel like we're looking at right now when we look at the church world is a bunch of dizzy people. They're falling all over the place every single day because they don't have clear, structured vision. And there was nothing wrong with the scripture for me. And I don't think that there is anything wrong with the scripture. I believe that the scripture is perfect. But again, when you have people who have they have different perspectives, and when they look at the scripture, people look at the scripture based off of their perspective, based off of where they are in life. And so when I started writing down the vision, it became plain to me that the things that I wanted to do in the first 5 years of ministry was absolutely unrealistic.
Like what?
For instance, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that I was going to have at least 300 people as members in my church for the first year.
You're trying to be, who's that guy from Jersey that had 300 or 400 people show up on the first day? Darius Daniels. You ever heard this story?
No.
The guy from Jersey, right?
I never heard of
Dark skin. Yeah, he said the short story that I heard, it was broadcast at one point, was, they said we're going to have church. A week later, people, showed up. He walked out after praying, and it was like 400 people there. I'm like,
wow.
Yeah, that's what I said. I said,
wow. He should write a book. Right? I'm serious. If he's getting those kinds of numbers, I want to know what model he had.
Now he has a mega church now.
Oh, he does.
Oh yeah, he has a mega church. Like no, real talk.
But
that was a story.
Did he have a name or a platform before he started the ministry? Because that helps.
I don't know.
Okay, because that's not hard to believe, because people who have platform before they started ministry, they get those kinds of numbers.
So platform meaning if you're touring and you're doing revivals.
Yes. If you've been successful in your ministry career as an artist.
Stop cursing on my podcast.
You have people who were an artist for many years.
That too, yeah.
And they start a church, and people flood their churches. And I don't know why they're going. I don't know if they're going for personality or if they're going because they really are seeking after the Lord. I don't know. But it's possible. I didn't have any kind of platform at all, and we had over 300 people in our first service. It's not unrealistic. It can happen. Now, next Sunday, I should write a book called Next Sunday. Next Sunday was totally different, because when you launch, you have ministry colleagues that are coming, you have friends, you have family. They're going to pack that place out. It's going to look great. You cannot be distracted by those numbers, because if you're distracted by those numbers and think that it's going to be like that continuing down the road, then you're really setting yourself up for failure.
So the grand opening of your business is not necessarily the telltale sign of what's going to happen.
No. Do you believe that you can take a generic percentage
of the grand opening?
From the grand opening?
Not a generic percentage, but there probably are best practices of what to expect from the grand opening afterwards.
Right.
Probably less than 50% of that.
Right. I mean, if you have a successful grand opening, you kind of can project if you're gonna how your first quarter is gonna be.
Sure.
Some people can clean up if they have a horrible grand opening. Then they know what they did wrong and they can clean up. And we had a little bit of both. For our grand opening of our business / church, we had what we did was we underestimated ourselves. We marketed the church plant as a large launch, because for our organization, or as you called it, a franchise, and I didn't call it a franchise. I will tell the bishops.
I'm telling Bishop, boy.
I will tell the bishops that you referred to it as a franchise. We'll see what they have to say about that. So in our organization, you launch small or you launch large, and we were planning on launching large, even though we took we were planning on launching small, even though we took a large launch model and implemented it. Does that make sense? Because we got the results of a large launch in our opening night because that was a model that we were using. Even though, silly us, were expecting to plant a small church. That's what we were expecting to plant. The only reason we took large launch models and implemented them is because we were in an area that was unchurched, and we thought we were going to have to really push it hard just to get the results of what a small launch would get. You understand what I'm saying? All right. I want to make sure you're following me, okay? Because that's what we did. And we didn't realize that marketing works. No matter if you're in the church or if you're in the world, marketing, if you do it right, it works. People will respond. They will come. I don't care if you're selling Pepsi or if you're selling Jesus.
You're still cursing on my podcast. I mean,
it's the truth.
Marketing and sales in the church. How dare you?
Oh, God. What do you think evangelism is?
It ain't marketing.
That's marketing. You're advertising Jesus. Yeah. Absolutely. You know, my wife got kicked out of a Bible study one time because she said we advertise Jesus. And the pastor said, we don't advertise Jesus. We don't put him on a billboard. We don't do that. And I'm like, okay.
But then how do you quantify? This is off topic. This is pastors talking now. How do you quantify, let your light so shine before men that they may see a good work and glorify?
That's not advertising.
The Father in heaven.
That's illuminating. That's glowing in the dark. Glow sticks. That's not advertising. So anyway, I don't want to pull you off topic. So yeah,
it's too late. It's too late. So you had a small launch mentality, but used a big launch strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's happening now after that?
It got us over 300 people that showed up to our launch. Mm-hmm. We weren't prepared for that. We prepared maybe for 100. And you should have saw our staff. We were all over the place. I mean, our launch team, we were in the attic. We were pulling out chairs, trying to seat people. All I saw was bad press leaving out of the building that night saying, they were discombobulated. They were all over the place. They don't have structure. That's all I saw. Bad advertisement. 300 people leaving out, going into the city saying, we went to that new church down the street. Their parking was crazy. There was no parking. There was no places to sit. They seemed shocked that we showed up. These were the things that's going into my head. Everyone else is celebrating that. Oh man, it's a crowd. I'm just looking at all of the obligation and the bad news that's going out.
Okay. So as someone who didn't go to the launch, I didn't see or hear that.
That's good. They didn't get to you. Hartford was too far. They only went to Danbury. I'm kidding. I just beat myself up like that.
That's what it sounds like.
I do. I'm hard on myself.
And let me tell you, hearing you say that, it brings back to mind when I saw some of your posts following the launch, when you were really highlighting, pushing the parking ministry and the usher ministry and some other things logistically. It kind of makes sense that you were responding to what you believe was bad press or bad feedback.
Absolutely.
Do you think you over responded or reacted?
I don't know.
How long have you been in the?
We've been there.
How long you been in business?
You're cussing too. We just celebrated a year in April.
So think it back a year later.
Yeah.
Do you think you overreacted when you tried to fix those problems?
I think, as a pastor, or as you say, a business owner, CEO, I think those issues, sometimes we think things are issues that really are not issues. The customers are happy. You have a product that they're coming to get.
Right.
They're fine. But sometimes it's the small things that we think is driving them away, and it's not. So it's not, So in that sense, maybe I did overreact. However, parking was an issue for us. It was an issue, and it continues to be an issue for us.
Why?
We don't have parking.
Because are you down in the center of town?
Yes.
Okay.
So we don't have parking. People have to park on the street, or the banks. We made an agreement with the banks that on Sundays, since they're not in business, we can use their parking lots. But once one parking lot fills up, if there's not an attendant out there telling people that they can park in the second parking lot, people don't know that. You know what I'm saying? So it is an issue. So maybe not as big of an issue as I was pushing, but it was an issue.
It's interesting to see what entrepreneurs latch onto as problem issues, depending on the business, but also depending on the moment in the season. So I believe entrepreneurs are not just people who launch new products or new projects. The entrepreneurs are people who relaunch old or existing brands.
Yeah.
Which, I've been a part of.
Yeah.
Even in the nonprofit world, relaunching departments, groups, teams, projects, etc. And I remember 2 years ago where I'm at now, what I harped on, what I made a big issue, some would consider, non-existent. But then when you look up 2 years later, in my case, 2.5 years later, you kind of see that what was an issue is no longer an issue because you made it such a highlight. And then at some point you transition to other things that need to be addressed and fixed.
Yeah.
So 12 months later, are you still worried about those same issues that you believe you received bad press for? Or are there new things that has caught your attention about the ministry you want to tweak or get better?
Yeah, there's always something new. I mean, in particular, specifically for us, we are at a 3:00 service. That to me,
I thought you got 2.
3 p.m. We've always been 3 p.m.
Oh, okay.
Even from the start.
Okay.
So that is an issue for us.
But being at 3:00?
It is, yes. Been at 3:00. It is not an issue for our current members. Our current members, they're okay either way. We do have people that will say, I would rather be in morning, but then you also have those people who say 3:00 works for them. You're never going to be able to make everybody happy. But if you're looking for numbers and you're looking for growth, then you kind of tally and figure out how you're going to get the most people. And for us in our city, the culture that we have in our city, everyone is used to worshiping in the morning. So it would be in our favor if we went to morning. That's a current issue that we're dealing with now. And we are going to switch to mornings. So there's always something. Another issue that we had, it wasn't even really an issue, but there was issues we saw in other ministries that we did not want to have in ours. Like, for instance, bullying first-time guests. People don't want to stand up and introduce themselves to your congregation. They don't. It is not an enjoyable experience at all. And I feel awkward when I see it happening, so I can't even imagine how the people feel that have to stand up and tell where they're from, tell the ministry that they grew up in, why they're in town. Yes.
Why are you here?
Why are you here? I mean, don't you want them to be here? I mean, no one wants to walk into an interrogation, not voluntarily anyway. So cut that out. Bye. Testimony service is wonderful. It's midweek kind of. That's a midweek
Don't you
feel.
say it.
It shouldn't happen on a Sunday.
Don't you say
Testimony service? No.
So I'm laughing because I grew up in a church where we made everybody stand up. We made everybody stand up and say who they are. And at some point it got awkward. So for me, I personally just say welcome.
Just welcome.
Like, hey, glad you're here.
Don't even make them stand up.
I'll talk to you one-on-one after service.
Just welcome. And we created a central place for them to connect. We call it the Connect Table. There's coffee there. There's a nice lady there. She greets people.
She's not mean.
She's not mean. She's very nice.
She don't wear white gloves?
No, she don't wear white gloves.
What about a white hat?
No, and she doesn't wear the Crocs or the nursing shoes or whatever they have. She doesn't have that.
I can't mess with you.
I mean, these things are honestly, these things we're holding on to. And we really just got to let them go. But not completely. For some cultures, it works for them, and they should continue to do that. I'm sure if I took the model that we have and placed it in Haiti, it would be rejected.
Oh, heck yeah.
Probably immediately.
Oh, dude.
I preach in jeans and a leather jacket some days.
How long is your church service?
90 minutes.
Yeah. And,
flat.
And Haitian, even in American Haitian churches? No,
that's the worship.
That's a snack.
Yes.
It is a worship.
Yes. Yes. Like, we're in and out. 90 minutes.
Yo, I used to go to visit my wife's church when we were dating, bro.
I know.
You need to bring a snack.
You have to.
You need to sit.
You have to. It's like going to the $5 movie theater.
Bro.
You've got to sneak in crackers and cheese. Yeah. Your protein level goes down.
I'm going to tell you, I do testimony. But I don't do it the way I grew up in terms of
Like pop-up testimony. You do pop-up testimony on
like,
Sundays.
Here's the question: what are you thankful for? That's it. Like, I'm thankful for life. Great, thank you. Next person. This is not giving on to the doctor dog. Like,
we got to stop that.
Nah. I'm thankful for life. Some people give a long testimony because it's a serious issue. Others, what I've noticed about that, I do testimony in that way just because it's good to hear what other people are going through. You haven't seen them all week,
of course,
and for people who happen to say something much more substantial than everybody else that day, I have noticed that people actually listen. Versus when I was growing up, man, everybody's testimony was at least 3, 4, 5 minutes a piece.
It was a sermon.
Minimum. It was a sermon. Mm-hmm. And I mean, like, no shades to people that I went to church with or grew up with. It is what it is. And it would last an hour, even if it was like a handful of people there. So now testimony, from at least my experience of testimony these days, it can be short. It can be extended. Sometimes it may erupt in prayer because of what you may have said or shared. I have seen people just connect. And even if they don't want to say anything in that moment, their head nodding. It's just like, thank you.
Well, I don't mind testimonies. I really don't. I think that rightfully so, if you're going to follow Jesus, you're going to have testimony, obviously. I think it's an iron sharpened iron tool. If I come in and I hear someone that may have gone through something similar as me, and it may spark hope in me that I can continue. That's wonderful. We need that. What I don't like is storytelling, because people are not giving testimonies. If you were testifying that the Lord paid your light bill, that is not a testimony. It really is not. It is just you talking about your poor management with money. I'm telling you the truth. But these are the things that we use.
I did not tell him to come
just
talk about
to fill. We fill up time. We think that we're supposed to fill up time in the program.
So let's pastor to pastor.
Yeah.
My sermon last Sunday, and I might have to re-preach this Sunday because I don't think I got my point across.
You can't do that.
Yes, I can. I'm gonna re-preach
if someone hears the same sermon from the pastor,
no, it's not the same sermon. It's the same text.
Oh, the same text.
Yeah,
okay.
I might have to revisit. Here's why. I preach from Matthew 25, the 10 virgins.
Yes.
And the sermon topic was supposed to be preparation. I don't know when this podcast is going to be uploaded, so whatever. Preparation and anticipation.
Yeah.
The reason I'm teaching this is because I'm in this year-long series on spirituality. Mm-hmm. And our scripture, the focus says, Romans 12:2, don't be conformed to the world, be transformed by the renewing of your mind, which says if you want to have a transformed life, you got to renew your mindset. And the whole goal is to become spiritual like the God that created us. And in order to become spiritual and transformed and renewed and all this other stuff, you got to have a different mindset. The mind is responsible for planning and anticipation, among other things, soft skills that matter to success. And you're talking about people testifying or telling stories about their lack of management because of their light bill. The interesting thing about that sermon for me was what I did preach about was flipping the script and stop saying yes and start telling people no.
Yes,
because the critical point in the text was when they asked, the 5 foolish virgins asked for extra oil.
Yeah.
And I told the second service this, and I think I told the first service this. There's a difference between people who are destitute, struggling, and hungry.
Of course.
And their need, according to James 2, if you're able to supply it, do it.
Right.
There's a difference between that type of person and the person who was capable, able, and had the resources to prepare and plan ahead, but didn't do so.
Absolutely.
And so they had a chance before they went to the bridegroom's party to bring extra oil. They were foolish, so they didn't do it. But they had enough money to get some extra stuff. So it wasn't like they were struggling. It wasn't like they were broke or poor. It was just your lack of planning and anticipation of what could or could not happen.
Absolutely.
It results in me flipping the scripts and me saying to you, because as a believer, we can feel so guilty to say yes and get ourselves in a bind. Now we're broke. Now we don't have extra oil. If you read the rest of the story, they had enough money and capacity to go get some extra oil.
Wow.
But the trade-off was you missed the party.
Yes. Okay.
So when you talk about, God paid my light bill, did he? I mean, look, listen. Miracles are cool. Like, we all need them sometimes. But that cannot replace the responsibility you have to be a spiritual person, because the God I serve, the God we serve, he's a planning, strategic God.
Absolutely.
Imagine he forgot to put gravity on Earth.
He doesn't leave anything wasted. And he wants us to be a good steward over what we have possession over. And stewardship it's not limited to just money. Stewardship is whatever resource you have. Time is a resource. Relationship is a resource. Information. You need to be a good steward over the information that you have. The gossiping mothers at the church they're not being a good steward over information that they have. If we get information about certain things and we don't use good stewardship over that information, it could really do some damage.
All that to say, for people watching, like, when you hear two pastors talk and teach, right, the concept of testimony is to share how God helped you overcome.
Absolutely. How God helped you overcome.
Now, there are times he performs miracles that really he shouldn't be doing. But everything in your life can't be a miracle.
No.
Sometimes God helps you overcome by giving you an idea.
Mm-hmm.
Think about the times that David went into battle,
mm-hmm.
and God said, "You know what? Hang back.
Mm-hmm.
I got this."
Yeah.
Or the times God said, "You know what? I want you to flank right,
mm-hmm.
because I'm going to make this happen. So
Mm-hmm.
when they come over your way, you come out an ambush. Now, you know what? I need y'all to split up. I need I need a team over here, team over there, and a team coming back."
Mm-hmm.
God is not limited to just performing miracles and dropping manna in your lap. That's not the only way he provides.
Mm-mm.
That can't be the only testimony.
No, if it was, I wouldn't want to serve that God.
It's kind of lazy.
I wouldn't want to serve that God. I would hate that he's using his time to find you a partner or to pay your light bill. I would hate to know that the God that I serve has to use his time to do that when he gave you obviously the strength, the ability to do those things. And you mentioned another word that was really good, capacity. And that's what I've been on this whole year, is the word capacity. My prayer is always, Lord, help me to manage the capacity that you have given me, because a lot of us have a big, huge, large capacity, but we fill it up with so much stuff, and we're busy, but we're not productive. I don't want to be that way. I really want to be a good steward over the capacity that I have. And some of us are asking for more when we don't have the capacity for that. And the only way that you stretch your capacity is by managing your current capacity. That's the only way.
So let's dig into that. So, managing capacity includes managing the team you have.
Yes.
And as a leadership guy, I see way too often leaders make bad leadership decisions that oftentimes is inclusive of not deploying their team as their arms, their legs, their feet, their eyes, their ears.
Guilty. I've been guilty of that.
How have you been guilty of that?
I have been guilty of that, man. When I first started, I was not a good delegator. I didn't delegate responsibility, and it almost really killed me. I think that the biggest way to kill momentum is to micromanage.
Facts.
It's the biggest way to kill momentum, but people do it all the time.
Why did you believe you doing it yourself was the only way?
I didn't trust other people's capacity. I didn't trust their judgment. I didn't think that it was going to be a representation of what I wanted the ministry to look like. I was going against what I said that I wanted. I wanted a ministry that was diverse, that represented diversity. But when diversity got ready to show up, I always shut it down because it wasn't me. You know what I'm saying? And I'm confessing that was 100% wrong. But you don't learn that until you're in ministry. People will listen to this and they will say, I know that. We all know it, until we get ready to lead. And I thought pastoring was something completely different than what it is. 90% of what I do, I never thought that I would be doing.
What did you think pastoring was, and what do you believe pastoring is now?
Pastoring for me, before I started, was preparing a sermon, moving the congregation to a better place than where it is right now. I always believed in vision. I just didn't take into consideration the small steps that it would take to make a vision come to pass. I didn't consider visiting the elderly in my congregation because having them is just as important as having the youth and the young adults. And I say that because it makes sense. When you have a multi-generational church, you have a healthy church. If you were taking the elderly and not using them, not making their voices feel valid, you're literally choking the life source of the ministry. I can depend 100% that on the first of the week, those elderly people, and you're about to laugh, but you know this is true. That money is going to be there. It is not going to bounce. It is a good check. And I can depend that when I get ready to make a ministry movement, I can depend I can depend on those numbers. You see what I'm saying? But if our vision is only young adults, youth, young adults, they're not bringing, they're bringing momentum. They're not bringing money, and it takes money to make it work. What are you doing? Are you tweeting?
No, I want to tweet that out. No.
Oh, cuss words. You don't want to tweet cuss words.
Do
you not agree with that?
It's true.
Yes.
It's true.
And that's a business mindset, right?
It's true. Like there was a point a year and a half ago. My wife and I were looking at taking on a couple other congregations, and we were in the process of considering, transitioning off of a ministry we founded and we have, which specifically caters to 55 and older. Mm-hmm. And what I was telling pastors that I was, talking with to say, hey, would you consider taking this on? One of several selling points was, man, it's ministry. Mm-hmm. Pastor Gary is one of the people that said to me, end of life ministry is just as important as early life or midlife ministry, which was good. Mm-hmm. So that was a selling point. Another selling point was, man, if you're looking to pastor and lead, this is a safe place to do it because it's, it's intimate. It's a nice size that has potential to grow even beyond what we've done. And then I don't know if this is the fourth point, fifth point, last point, but one of the biggest selling points was I don't have no bills, and no matter what they give, it's consistent.
Yeah.
So if you're looking to put some money in your pocket, if that's important to you, or partly important to you, if you're worried about the overhead of running a business, which there is none in this case for that ministry,
that's like it's gold mine.
It's probably curse words too, but it's consistent. It is viability.
Yeah,
it is viability, and needless to say, we didn't transition off that ministry.
Thank goodness.
But it's like, I don't think people consider the fact that running a successful business requires baseline consumers who support your business regardless.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Because there are going to be those who on the sidelines who would never buy your product. In our case, in the business we're talking about, not necessarily Jesus, but just you. They're not buying into the ministry, whatever. Then there are people in the middle who may be open, but you need your baseline to have you covered, man.
Absolutely. You have to have it. You really have to have it. And if I didn't learn this quick, I probably would have ran all of the older people out of the church because I was after this movement. I was after fresh zeal and numbers. And that's what I really thought. I measured the success of a ministry to how many young adults do you have? How is it popping or what? That's what the successful ministry looked like. To me, it only takes a few months pastoring to destroy every theology you ever thought that a pastor was. So that's what it is to me. So I take time. I visit the elderly in the congregation. I want to make sure that they understand that their voices are heard. If we're making major decisions about the church, particularly if it's moving the church into a different direction, or if we're going to be interrupting things that the elderly were used to, I take into consideration. I ask them, how would you feel about that? Whenever we have had to make major decisions in the ministry, I have had dinner and I sat down with the top 20% givers in our congregation and asked them, if I make this decision, because this is the decision I want to make, in the back of my head, I'm going to make it anyway. But people with money like to know that, their voices are being heard. And of course, this can be a cuss word too, because it's almost making it seem as if people have stock in the ministry. I'm not saying that people have stock in the ministry, but people have stock in the ministry. You see what I'm saying? And me visiting the top 20% and asking them if they're going to back me on a decision that I'm about to make doesn't mean that I don't value those who don't give as much. I do value them. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. But there's some decisions that you have to make as a leader that you just have to know that it's going to be funded.
I mean, what you're pretty much saying is that you're learning pastoring in today's time. Really, when you think about it, it's no different than what Paul articulated in all his writings. I mean, you look at the drama of leadership. You're pissed at me, so you stop giving. I mean, I'm still come and preach the gospel anyway. Appreciate the kind words. Thank you for supporting the ministry. I don't need your money. Or I heard about the issue with Deacon so-and-so sleeping with so-and-so. I mean, what you're talking about is pastoring is leadership. It's the nuance required to navigate human behavior and human exchanges over a defined period of time that they're under your portfolio or under your watch.
Yes, but this is true for every pastor, even the old school ones that would consider our verbiage today cuss words or borderline. Even though they don't agree with the verbiage, what they're doing is exactly what we're saying. Yeah. But they wouldn't agree with it. It makes them, it scares them to think of ministry in that way. But it is what it is.
It is what it is. You mentioned something earlier about the overhead of ministry. Where have you seen the biggest overhead expense as it relates to the business that you're running?
Mortgage or rent, and salary. Those two are always.
That's interesting. You were.
How is that interesting? You don't believe musicians should get paid?
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay.
I'm not on that side.
Okay, you're not on that side. Not on that side of the tracks.
I know some people like, do it for the love.
Yeah, that's another philosophy people have.
It's a career choice.
You're doing it for the Lord.
Yeah, so it's preaching.
Career choice. Career choice. You're cussing.
I find it interesting that you have 5 people on staff, paid staff, so early. Why did you feel the need to pay? Well, let's take you out of it. You know what? Let's keep you in it. Because some people would argue that as the business owner, you don't take a salary until you're at until the business is at a certain financial level.
Oh.
Why have you paid yourself so early in the business?
Oh.
And then why have you decided to pay those particular staffing positions so early in the business?
I paid myself early because Inframil.
Like, I was waiting for the rest of it. What?
Inframil is expensive.
Kids are expensive.
Yes. And I have a newborn. 4 months old, I had to pay myself early. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, people are going to think what they're going to think. I would have to be here all day to explain. We are in a place to be able to do what we're doing. I wouldn't do it if we weren't. Everyone is not in that place. And I would suggest that people take inventory of what they have and they be a good steward of what they have. We laid the groundwork. Before we planted, we were in that city 9 months to a year. We were advertising, marketing, what have you. We were collecting people, we were doing that. We were doing the groundwork so that when we got started, we were a little bit further ahead than where most people are, especially people of color who start ministries. We just were. Thank goodness, We were also connected to an organization that helped us financially and continued to help us financially. So we're blessed. We have those opportunities. Not everybody does.
Mm-hmm.
There were many people who had much more opportunities than what we had. I mentioned to you prior to coming here. I know people who started their churches by moving families from across country, and they have 20 people and they start with those people. I mean, that's amazing for the person that's listening to this who started a church with their family. That seems like heaven to them.
Yep.
So we had it to put ourselves on salary, and so we did it. The salary that our musicians on, some people would laugh at. They wouldn't have it. Thankfully, we have humble musicians. Well, it was a while. We use wisdom. We took people from the music program at the university in our city, and we created somewhat of an internship for them. And so even though they're serving and they're getting paid to do it, it is also in their favor to do it as well. So you just have to be wise.
Nice, smart. And then what about your admin?
My admin is a college student as well.
Mm-hmm.
And, it looks good for her to be doing what she's doing. And she is a single mother. And so I wouldn't have her doing the administration at the church. And I know how much time goes into that.
Yeah.
And not being paid.
Yeah. And so, besides staff, you said the biggest cost you have is rent. I mean,
yeah.
Is it insane for you guys?
It's a lot because we're on downtown Danbury on the main street, which is the busiest street in our city. And I will say this, if I might add, if we don't make budget for that month, I'm the first person to say, don't pay me, because I won't put the ministry in a place that we can't be. And there are some months we do good, and there are some months we don't do so good.
Okay.
I mean, you have your budget, you have your projected budget. And if you don't meet that, there's money. You can take money from other places and make you meet it. But that's not good business.
So why not wait a year in, 2 years in before dishing out so much on staff? Or why not move elsewhere to save money on rent?
We have a really good deal with where we are. The building that we are using, the city does not want it to go unused. It's a landmark for them. They're very happy when we came to use the building, and the property itself is expensive. Thankfully, we don't pay everything that we could be charged for using the space. Mm-hmm. So we don't really have a lot of overhead. We really don't. But the most of our expenses are the salary and the rent. But we don't have a lot of overhead because we have a lot of sponsors, a lot of sponsoring churches that pour money into our ministry as a church plant. And we also have the organization plus what we collect, obviously, as a body.
I mean, it is a business, and I think, for people listening, it can be daunting to launch something new.
Oh God.
And, we started out jokingly talking about going to the bank and going on the wing of the prayer, but I think, a lot of people think that is the only way to launch a business. I've learned over my years, there's so many different ways to launch a business whereas you may go to a bank, get a loan, or some sort of financing option, or you may have sponsors. And then there's the idea of just launching a business from where you are, whether it's in your garage. I mean, we're talking about a church or a business, your living room.
Yeah, look at Amazon.
I mean, and watching it grow from there, and then figuring out financing options as you move along. So there is no one way of doing things.
But it all goes back to stewardship, taking what you have possession over and getting the most out of it.
Yeah.
There are people who've done well by starting in their houses. I know pastors who right now they probably see 500 to 800 people in their congregation today. Mm-hmm. And 30 years ago, that wasn't the story. They started in their living room. You just have to take what you have and work it. I was just encouraging a pastor who was a church planter on last week, and I was telling him the same thing. You have it in your congregation. What you need, you have it in your church. You may not think so, but you have it. He says to me, well, yeah, it's easy for you to say because you have this, such, and such for your church. And I'm like, no, we didn't always have that. If you're telling me that you have one person that comes to your church, pour into that one person. just pour into them. You know what I'm saying? Until they get someone else, and then you just pour into them. You just have to use what you have. I think that we kind of paralyze ourselves looking at what we think other people have and we don't have. You know, it goes back to Lot and his wife, whose name was never mentioned, and obviously for obvious reasons. You know, she looked back because she thought that what she was leaving or what they had was better than what she was going towards. And I think that we always do that, you know, particularly in the body of Christ, but even in life, we look at what other people have and we compare ourselves to that.
Why do you think pastors or planters are so embarrassed with humble and small beginnings?
Because we made it seem that if you have to start that way, you didn't hear from the Lord. It's just what we've made it seem.
Or we're chasing an image and a dream of church that is fake.
Well, we live in that now. You know, I mean, Instagram is the leading market tool in the world. It's ridiculous that it brings in that much money because people are really in love with images. We're in an image nation. It's our imagination. People are not posting their real struggle. They're only posting the good stuff. You know what I'm saying? And then some of it is not even good. They're creating good scenarios and posting them. You know, it's just, and then we compare ourselves to that. That's what we want.
Fake news.
Fake news. It's fake news.
You know, it's interesting you're talking about the idea of pouring into that one person and the next. I forgot who I was talking to. Another pastor friend about true evangelism and discipleship is not going door to door. When you look at what Jesus instructed to his disciples, go out 2 by 2, find a place of peace. If you find that place, settle down. Don't bring a purse, don't bring money. Just allow that household to minister to your needs and be the draw for what's going to happen. If you go to a place and find no peace, you're not welcome, shake the dust off your feet, go to the next place. Now, growing up, that was almost used as a rallying cry to push people to the side or to kind of not welcome folks or to castigate people. When in the text, when you look at it from the lens of a leader, what Jesus is simply saying is go where you're welcomed. And that's okay. The place where you're welcomed is where you'll find your strength. Think about the woman at the well. She's an outsider. Wasn't quite welcome because she slept with everybody's husband. He's an outsider. He's doing something that is improper, talking to a woman, which is culturally inappropriate. And yet, between Jesus and this woman, there was this kindredness that happened. She was drawing water. He was thirsty. And then he offers us something in exchange. Like, hey, well, wait a minute. If you knew who I was, you'd be asking me for something to drink. What's interesting about that woman, she comes off as someone who deeply cared about serving the needs of other people. Just let that sit for a moment. Extremely sexually active woman, according to scripture, pleasing the needs of others. Jesus is thirsty. She's drawing up water. When he reveals himself, then she, even despite being talked about, castigated, pushed aside, misused, abused, accused, or whatever, she still told everybody the good news.
Of course.
Still meeting the needs of the people. And all that to say, you know, when you talked about pouring into someone, it could lead to just massive reactions.
Of course.
That you just cannot expect.
Of course. Because, you know, people are not used to that. And they love it because you're pouring into them and you're showing them attention. And honestly, that is true discipleship. And that's one of the things that we always push at the River is true discipleship. And it's not handing out scary tracts with fire picture cartoons on the back of it. It just scares people into heaven. It's ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. And I'm so glad we're moving from that, because it doesn't represent the church well. But true discipleship really is sitting down, pouring into an individual, talking to them. You don't know how long the discipleship will be. The discipleship for many people could be for their entire life. It could be for many years. We think discipling persons is just sitting down with them one time and sharing with them the message of Jesus Christ. The message of Jesus Christ can't be shared in just one conversation. It's how you live out your life. You're constantly discipling them. And that's what we have to remember. Discipleship. Why are you laughing? Why are you laughing?
I had the image of Jehovah's Witnesses just popping in my head when you talked about passing out tracts and passing.
But you know what? They're effective in what they do, but are they really? Are they really?
How you going to make a statement and question yourself?
They're effective in what they do because they get a response, but are they really? I mean, has there been true change taking place in a person's heart? Has their heart condition changed? I don't know. We may never know. But I do know it for Christians, that when I was discipled, my heart condition was changed. I wasn't just another body that was collected to a mass of people. I didn't feel that. But I feel that many different religions, that's what they do, and particularly Jehovah's Witnesses. They knock on my door, and, I listen to what they have to say if I have the time. Sometimes I don't have the time to listen to what they have to say, but I cannot be converted. And so I will not change. I won't let them waste their time. If I feel like they're very passionate about it, I won't lead them on. But, I only made that statement and then only to go back and stomp on it, because we have that mindset even in the body of Christ sometimes, that the more numbers we have, that's how effective we measure our effectiveness and discipling people based off of the numbers that we have. And sometimes just because we have a large amount of numbers in our church doesn't mean that we've discipled every single person. There are people who've been in church for years and they've never been discipled. Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'll tell you the lesson I learned about pastoring that I would never forget came this year when my first church member passed away.
Wow. Yeah.
She was 90 plus years old.
Yeah.
God bless her. And so I did her funeral, and I confessed to the family and everybody there. I said, I was sad when she passed, of course. It hurt because it was not expected. But when I did her funeral, there was something that just became very clear to me about my job. My job, my vocation as a pastor. And that is, my job is to get people across the finish line. That person that passed away, Sister Love, we believe she's in heaven, having a good old time with Jesus. And it was my honor to, as Pastor Gary said, provide end of life ministry. She wasn't, in the hospital like that. She was an active member coming, So she wasn't one of those people I had to visit. She was just at church all the time. I think that was one of the biggest revelations that I've taken away from being a pastor, man. Mm-hmm. Making sure you get across the finish line. As many people as I can.
Yeah.
Before I go.
Absolutely. Dude, that's so well put. So well put. I mean, I remember having these moments as early on, planting this church. I was so focused on building this church that I remember the first time my pastor's hat was tugged on. And I thought to myself, oh, yes, I am supposed to be that.
Yep.
Because you get so consumed in the work of the ministry and doing and doing and doing that when the person, they start tugging on your pastor's hat and they need counseling because their marriage is getting ready to be over and you need to counsel them. It centers you. It lets you know the work still needs to be done. The real work needs to be done, not you building whatever you want to build, because there are people who are building like, massive enterprises for themselves
Yeah.
when it comes to ministry. And
Yeah.
that takes a lot of time. But ministry, it should always bring you back to the center of it all. And that is that you should be healing somebody in some way, shape, or form. How many people have you healed? And I'm not just talking about physically, but spiritually and mentally. You should always be bringing them back to Jesus so that he can heal the pain or whatever they're going through. We just had a similar situation where we had a member's family member who passed. Now, this person wasn't even a member of the church, but their family member was a member of the church, and they passed and didn't have the money to pay for the funeral. Mm-hmm. And so the member of our church comes to us. And I remember I spoke to someone who I really trust, and I was talking to them about it, and they said, these are the moments. You're learning what it is to be a pastor, because you're going to get that. Church for many people means many different things. And for many people, it just means, for her in that moment, it meant, I don't have it. I believe the church has it, and I'm going to ask them if I can draw from them. And, as a pastor, you got to make those type of decisions. When I started this church, I didn't think about that. No, I didn't think people treated tithes and offering as a 401k investment plan, that when they gave it to you, they thought that they can come back and ask for it back. I never thought that. But these things happen. They happen. Absolutely. Oh, God. I've silenced the host. Another cuss word? Did I cuss again?
Tithes and offering is a 401k that has a investment and a withdrawal date.
Some people treat it that way. Some people think that.
Have you had to tell somebody no before?
Since starting this church? Yeah. I mean, we're downtown Danbury. We're not, even though we're in Fairfield County, we're not Richfield. We're not Greenwich. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So we have people who have needs.
Yeah.
But that's why, our congregation is so diverse. We have people in our church who literally, they give so much because they have so much, and they have businesses and things like that, and they have so much. And then on the other side of the congregation is single moms who they don't have it. And all of these people are worshiping in the same place.
Yeah, man. It's real, telling people no. Telling people, that's not what we're here for.
That's not going to happen. Yeah. Because you know what? You don't want to turn anybody away. You don't want to lose anybody, especially if they're laborers. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Because there are those who they cannot give financially, and that's fine, but they're there.
The tough thing that people, I think, don't consider also, you make those requests to the church, you do for one, you got to do for all. And it starts an avalanche that is unsustainable and unaffordable.
Yes. Which is why I say no.
Yeah, it's interesting, man. So what's next for the church? Where do you see, what do you see that's, let me just say, what's next? What do you see coming up?
Well, first of all, we are wanting to switch to morning services. I'm not sure how much detail you want, but we're wanting to switch to morning services. Our ultimate, 5-year plan will be to be in our own facility. That would be a wonderful thing for us, so that we weren't sharing a building with other people. That would be great. That would be wonderful. That's our ultimate goal.
To go to morning service?
Hopefully not. So you have to make those decisions.
What else is next?
So that's next. Right.
That shift.
Right. That and nothing else is next until that happens. Because we can't really build on the question. You know what I'm saying? Right now, it's questionable. What are we going to do? Are we going to go to morning, or are we going to stay at evening? And we don't want to continue to build evening if our goal is to go to morning.
Have you gotten out of the business of talking about what's next and realize that whatever's next gets revealed almost in the moment? And it
has to, because you know what? When you constantly talk about what's next, you're only setting yourself up for disappointment. Mm-hmm. Because the reality is, you don't know what's next. You can plan what's next, but you don't know what's next. I was just talking about this the other day. You remember the blind man who Jesus healed, and he put the spit on his eyes and all that good stuff. What I realized when I read that scripture is that the man had an encounter with Jesus, and he still had to leave his encounter with Jesus the same way he came. And that, for us, is not what we have in our mind. We have this Disney type gospel, and we think that we only need one encounter with Jesus and it's going to change everything. But that's not always the truth. And I think he was trying to demonstrate to us that you can literally have an encounter with Jesus, and when you get back home, the same bills that you left on the table are not going to evaporate in the air. They will still be there. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And what I never realized about this story is that the man never actually got to see Jesus. When they asked him at the end of the text, where is he? He said, I don't know. And I'm thinking to myself, why would he say he doesn't know? Because he never knew what he looked like. Jesus never let the man see him. He healed him and gave him instructions. And when he gave him instructions to go wash his eyes, he had moved on to the next thing. So the man lived his whole life, had an encounter with Jesus, but never seen him. And we have a struggle with that because we want Jesus to be what we've always taught have always been taught that he would be. And sometimes he doesn't show up in that form. Sometimes he shows up and we say that the way that he showed up is a ghost. I mean, Peter and the disciples did it when he was walking on the water in the storm. They misdiagnosed him. And the thing that came to save him, they said that it was a ghost. And sometimes we misdiagnose God. And I think that that's why he can't get the blessings to us the way that he wants to get them to us. But anyway, I'm done preaching for today.
Parting words for people that are watching.
Parting words. You're just so funny to me, man. But anyway, I love your sense of humor that you're able to see things in a different light. I think you're on to something. And it's so good and refreshing to see someone in our generation. Yes, it's good to hear that there are people in our generation that understand. You know what I'm saying? And they're not caught up in the facade. It's good. It's good and it's refreshing. So please keep up what you're doing. So parting words. Am I talking to the church planters or am I talking to business owners and pastors?
They're all the same to me.
Cussing.
To this podcast.
Cussing. I really would just encourage anyone who's starting just to take that first step, man. Really, just take the first step. It may not be exactly what you thought it was going to be. 9 times out of 10, it won't be. Mm-hmm. But just hang in there. It will get better. It will pick up. I know that's easier said than done. People always look back and say that once they've gotten successful. But I'm in the struggle with you. And I'm telling you, it's hard. There's going to be some days that it's easy and some days that it's not. And just hang in there. And I learned to stop watching the front door and watch the back door. I used to always watch the front door of people. I wanted to see the people coming in. I wanted to see if they were coming in or not. And then one time it occurred to me, I shouldn't be watching the front door. I should really be watching the back door. And that's the door that nobody watches. That's the door that people go out of and they sneak out of. You know, it's one Sunday, they're there every Sunday. And then before you know it, they're out because they went out the back door and you didn't even notice it because you were too busy watching the front door. So let that be my parting words right there. Bam, drop mic.
So I'll tell you, I received that. And, you know, I did a podcast earlier this year, Getting to Sunday. The podcast was just a brief review of how this current church that we're at right now got started. And it got started because somebody dared me to just do it.
You started a ministry off of a dare and you getting on me about cussing?
Well, we worship in the building across the way where you were. This is our third plant. And we were supposed to plant the third ministry 2.5 years ago, but my daughter was born prematurely by 3 months. Wow. So that shut down everything.
And she's well.
She's running the house, bro. Wow. But she's doing well. And the church at that time was going to be in another part of Hartford at a school. Built a relationship with the principal. I mean, did all the research necessary about the community. Everything you could think of that needed to be done, it was done. Baby girl came early. I started realizing I can't afford this building. I can't bank on collecting enough tithes and offerings to pay rent and, you know, even my own giving. Put that on hold. And so, you know, 2 years later, I was talking to a few people about that, and I said, man, you know, I have this office space, and I got this space we're in now by accident. Because I was going to take over another ministry. It just didn't work out. And I happened to lease this space on behalf of that ministry, and it just didn't work out. But I kept the space. I'm like, well, what am I going to do with the space? And somebody said, you should really start a church. Like, why? And they said, really, no, seriously, you should just start the third location. I haven't done any marketing, haven't built a core team, haven't done anything. So just do it. The reason I did the podcast and the reason why it was so important for me, I think there are times where I can get stuck in overanalyzing situation and become extremely paralyzed. Now, people showed up with very little marketing, very little outreach. Even if nobody showed up, the fact that I booked the space and rent the space and had everything set up for January 6th, 2019. Once I set foot in that place and turned on the mics, that was it. I'm there every Sunday, whether it's me by myself, me and just my family, or me and other people coming. And, we talk about just taking that first step. It's so important, man, because I think you can psych yourself out from seeing what will be or could be. Even if it doesn't work, there are things you learn from it and you apply it elsewhere.
Every single time.
So you got to be open to that.
Absolutely.
But then also, as you talked about in this podcast, not getting sucked into the fake world that is created by Instagram and social media.
Yeah.
That, man, I'm preaching to thousands. And
oh God.
I'm pastoring thousands. No. And my congregation bought me a mansion. That's
God.
it happens, but the rarity of that, the normality of that is not necessarily something that can be easily replicable, especially in New England.
Right.
That's another lesson, another bunch of lessons I learned about pastoring and planting in New England. And so
you should write a book about that.
I probably should. It's different, man. It's different. And I think the reality of just taking all that in for people who are launching, this is why this year's podcast has been dedicated to just do something. You want to launch a new business, a nonprofit, a ministry, whatever. Do it.
But that's the thing. And that's what people need to understand. Everyone doesn't have the grace on their lives to be a senior pastor. And maybe the Lord is calling you to launch a ministry, but maybe you need to launch it within a church where someone else is the lead pastor.
Yeah.
Looking back, I'm like, I should have did that.
Really?
Because then, no, I'm kidding, but I'm just saying there are days when I feel like I want to be a sheep. I don't want to be a shepherd. You know what I'm saying? Because being a shepherd means a whole lot of responsibility. And I didn't realize that I wasn't as good as a sheep that I thought I was until I became a shepherd. And I realized you weren't really as good of a sheep as you thought you were. You could have did that better. You could have been more faithful. You could have been more loyal. You could have been there more. You know what I'm saying? Because if I ever had to go back and do it again, I think I would be a wonderful sheep, man. Knowing the back end, behind the curtain. And once you peek behind that ministry curtain, you can never be the same. Even if you go visit a worship service, you see everything that's happening wrong and happening right, even in the behind the scenes. It is what it is. But one of the things that I learned is that we have to build a community and not a congregation. I went into church planting trying to build a congregation, and I realized it doesn't work because all you're doing is getting church members from other places and church. You know what I'm saying? They're just transplanting from. Then you're building a congregation, and they never last. But if you build a community,
piece by piece,
I'm telling you, you cannot go wrong, man. And those people who join your community, not your congregation, but your community, I don't care what happens, you will survive. God forbid a scandal comes out.
Yeah.
If you want a community behind you, if a scandal comes out about you or something crazy comes out, you want a community. Congregation, they're out. Community, never. They never will. It takes time, though, to build a community. You have to invest yourself into people.
Yeah. You look at contemporary music artists. You look at sports stars, pop culture. It's the community. That's what social media has. That's a lesson.
Yeah.
The success you see people have is because they built a community. A community.
Yes, absolutely. Even though it's a virtual community, some people feel more connected to that than they do their own flesh and blood.
Yeah, that's true.
I know people, young adults, they live in their house with their parents. And they don't have a relationship with their parents, but they have a relationship with someone who lives thousands of miles away, and they will confide in them information that they would never, ever tell their parents, and they eat dinner with them every night.
Yeah.
Community is powerful, man. Once someone feels connected to what you have going on, they're yours.